businesses without a cause won't survive. If you're, and it's everything from like sparkling water to Beast Burger to whatever, like the brands of the future are brands who are mission centric. The brands of the future that just won't survive are ones that just have no compelling story.
On part 2 of this series of our Business Monday Call to Leadership segment, we continue to answer the question, what happens when we reframe our entire business model around creating an engaging, compelling story, which draws our customer, our end user in as the hero of the story, with you and I as the trusted guide. I've invited special co-host PJ Accetturo to join me, who is an expert in both storytelling and an entrepreneur himself. Can't wait for you to listen in. I'm Dr. Nate Sala, and this is a call to leadership.
How do you actually do that?
Right. What's
next?
What's the practical application?
Right.
So let's talk about it from a film perspective.
Okay.
How does a filmmaker start the process of identifying what the desired state is of that individual audience member, right? During that film. So, for example, there's a when you're making a television show, or or whether you're making a movie, you're thinking of how do I want them to feel?
Right. Yeah, I mean, let's think. So maybe Stranger Things is like maybe a good example where, you've got the filmmakers said to themselves some degree of, I really miss the 80s. I missed watching 80s films, but I also miss feeling that nostalgic sense of the 80s where life was pre-internet, life was pre-national news. You can go out, ride bikes with your friends, latchkey kids. I want to recreate the magic and nostalgia of that. But I also love 80s horror films. I love, sort of scary monsters films. Is there a way we could converge the coming of age story with 80s nostalgia with 80s horror, kind of films? And when we combine them together, can we create something that's scary, but something that's exciting and something that's nostalgic?
Exactly.
Right.
So this is in the film industry. Mm-hmm. That's the formula. Right. What you love, what you might miss, or what's missing.
Right.
And how that connects with a particular demographic.
Yes.
So let's take Southwest Airlines, for example. Great example, right? They knew that there was a market for what we call a no-frills airline, where there's not going to be assigned seats. The pricing is very competitive. There's not going to be meals. It's just going to be some snacks, and they're going to have one type of airplane. Marrying that with fun, autonomy, really just love. That's they're in the love business. They have a love field, right? And giving the customer, the flyers, an experience that is remarkably different than any other airline. I mean, we've talked about this. I've seen flight attendants who rap the opening, the instructions on the flotation devices and all this other stuff, and some tell jokes. There's a quality of jovialness that you won't find on Delta or American.
Yeah.
That's their differentiation strategy for creating experience so that you get to be the hero of this amazing experience.
Right. Case in point, Charlene's flying here yesterday, and she flew Southwest, and she's never sent me a video of her on an airplane, but she did yesterday because the airline attendant was just on fire, reading through their safety guide with the funniest jokes. And she became the hero in that moment where she was sharing with me this really awesome experience that I've never gotten on a flight unless I've flown Southwest. And it was awesome for her. Yeah.
And that's part of the contagiousness of the hero then sharing and becoming a guide to others.
Yes.
Because she was a guide to you to show you, look at how cool this is. And there's so much value if we could just take a step back in business and identify, first of all, put the guide hat on. Okay, I'm a guide. Where am I taking my hero, right? And how do I fade out of that story? Because as you said, the guides in these stories fade out so that the hero can rise.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the practical application is, do I know what my mission is? Do I have a very clear sense of mission? Is it a worthy cause?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a worthy cause? And not just the widget, but for example, in our accounting advisory firm, I do say we're in the love business. People need love, especially when it comes to the stresses of taxes. So that is our actual mission. It's a funky mission, but you'll love it because it's so unorthodox. It's to satisfy your tax and accounting needs so outstandingly that your joy becomes infectious. Now, who puts the word joy and taxes in the same sentence, right? Nobody. But this is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
This is what you're talking about with Stranger Things, right? It's the differentiation that causes a desire and appeal that says, you know what? I want my joy to be infectious. Now, is the reduction in tax necessarily the joy? No, it's that pair of shoes.
Yeah.
It's that trip to Disney.
Yeah, it's what it enables.
Exactly. So when we're talking about business, one of the first questions I think we want to ask in creating this model for the epic story in your business is what does your product or service, what does it enable? Beyond, I've got a new jacket from Patagonia.
Right.
And that's not a question that we're going to answer for you.
Right.
But it's a question you have to ask.
Absolutely. And the great news is we're in an age where social entrepreneurship, social good through brands is really compelling, really trendy, in a good way. It was really popular in the 2010s as personified by Tom's shoes, right? It's like one for you, one for them. Ironically, that model proved to be really actually detrimental for the shoe cobblers in these emerging markets, right, where they're like, look, you guys dumped one shoe on one city in Africa, put everyone out of business, but you never came back, so then no one had shoes the next year. So there's some component of any socially focused business definitely needs to understand if helping can hurt and total economic ramifications of that. But digression aside, people do want to buy into businesses at the cause. I heard this really good quote, which was something to the effect of businesses without a cause won't serve, like they won't be around. They won't survive. If you're, and it's everything from like sparkling water to Beast Burger to whatever, like the brands of the future are brands who are mission centric. The brands of the future that just won't survive are ones that just have no compelling story. They have fancy colors. Like who cares?
And they have to believe it.
Right.
Because there's organizations who possibly will say, okay, we need a really compelling mission. It's like, no, that's the wrong question to ask, right? Mm-hmm. It's what truly drives us.
Right. And it comes from visionary leadership. You can't do it by committee. I don't think so.
It's totally top down.
Yeah.
And of course, we would say bottom up from a servant leadership perspective. Right? Because that's the nourishment comes from the roots, if you will. So the servant leader then nourishes the branches to produce good fruit based on the quality of the vision and the mission and the values that bear a certain kind of fruit. Mm-hmm. And so business 101, I have to know what my customers want and need. I have to have the competencies to satisfy those needs, and I have to stand out in the crowd to differentiate. Mm-hmm. But I think all within this realm of storytelling. Your business is a story.
Right.
You are not the hero.
Yeah. I mean, well, look, everything comes back to Apple, right? We got to talk about Apple a little more in that Apple, was an underdog. In these days and age, it's easy to miss the fact that Apple was an underdog back in, Steve's, the inception of the, rebranding. So maybe walk us through a little bit of that and how storytelling was a a way that they saved Apple.
Indeed. I'm glad you brought that up. So part of the problem with Apple in 97, 98, 99, they had a lot of products. In fact, Jobs said famously that Apple was executing exquisitely on all the wrong things, right? So the model then was, let's strip it all and let's just have 4 segments, 2 personal, 2 business, right? And in that process, they really had no products until they could start developing. And of course, they redid the Mac and then the iPod and so on. But during that time, Steve said, we have to tell a story. We have to tell a story to send a message, wave our flag to our ideal avatar. Who is it that resonates? Who is our base that resonates most with our product, that we're saying, hey, we're coming back? And so they come up with this campaign, which was the Think Different campaign. Interestingly, the proper grammar is think differently, but it was a play on proper grammar, because to think differently is not to think different. That makes sense. Yeah. So they have this advertisement that goes out, which was the here's to the crazy ones, right? So this is Richard Dreyfuss has he did the audio, but Jobs originally did it first. And even though he didn't write the entire script, it was his heart and his approval of that script. But here's what it says. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round heads in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. The only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
And that was Steve.
That was Steve. And what he did with this is that he invited his crazy ones to join him in becoming the heroes of the story as he guided them.
Yep.
How powerful is that?
It's so powerful. And I love, I'm kind of an Apple fanboy over the years, because in the creative industry, we all felt so empowered to that, Photoshop, Lightroom, a lot of editing programs were so great on Apple computers. And you've got all, the entrenched industry of Windows and all those things, and they were so cumbersome. Then you've got this new sleek product that's for artists, for filmmakers, for designers. It was powerful. Now Apple's, they're have different issues where they are they're not the incumbents anymore. They're the nominees. But I think if we're talking about disrupting markets, you have, if you're an outsider to a market and you want to change and challenge everything, you have to have some sort of differentiator. You have to have some sort of underdog messaging around you too.
Yeah, and so his messaging was a wake-up call.
Yeah.
And hey, here we are. We're back. Are you ready to go on this amazing journey?
Right.
And keep in mind, friends, these are cell phones. I mean, this is a computer. I mean, think about it. Like, if you look at your old Dell computer or your old MP3 player, how does this terminology apply to your Dell computer or your old MP3 player? The answer is no, right? Because you've got to create the desire based on your own passion, your own message that's so clear and so compelling and so achievable that it draws people in to join you in authoring the story. And if you can effectively, if you can transparently, if you can genuinely and sincerely, then you begin to see the value begin to arise because people vote with their dollars.
Right. 100%. So yeah, it's almost like in a sense, because all of storytelling is based with a precursor to the vision. You have to have the vision before you can tell a story about that vision.
Right.
So it's almost like, I'm sure you have other podcasts. You should plug up a previous episode where it's vision formation, right?
No doubt.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we like a callback, right? So the vision is essential first. You have to know where you want to go. That's where, so the people say mission, vision, values. I say vision, mission, values, right? Start with the greater vision. The greater vision in this particular context was let's get our base back and let them know great things are coming, right? We don't even have them yet. See, this is what's brilliant about what Jobs was doing is that they didn't have an iPod, they didn't have an iPhone, they didn't have an iPad, they didn't have any of that. They didn't have iTunes, right? But they knew that our vision is we're going to do some radically amazing things. Are you ready to go on a ride? Let's go do it together. And so that's the vision. You begin to get a community built around that vision, and you begin to then execute on that vision with the mission, our justification for existence, with what our core values are, with the right people in the right seats. And this is actually important to segue because I think an essential part of creating a story around your brand, your business, is having the creative aspect of it. You may think, well, I'm not creative. I can't tell a story. What do you say to that?
Yeah, that's not true at all. We're all artists and we're all storytellers. The question is, in which particular areas of our genius zones can we reconsider those as arts? Accounting, right?
Yeah, accounting, right? Talk about the most bland, boring profession.
Yeah.
But the story is, how do we create the memories and lives based on our genius zones, our skills and our expertise that continue to perpetuate?
Mm-hmm.
And so you may not be, you may have some roadblocks, let's say, that keep you from expressing your creativity in how you develop a story.
Yeah. Storytelling's an art, right? It's almost akin to, playing music. Like there are people who are born more naturally having an ear for music and more naturally having an ear, in this case, for storytelling. But that doesn't mean that there aren't, frameworks and guides that help you. So, one of the quick tips I always tell when telling just people in natural conversations about storytelling is start with a crisis, a problem. And your greatest, you start with the stakes, let me try to think, sometimes when I tell people about how we fundraised, we got with our investors now, who's Gala Games, who's investing in our TV show. I'll tell the story about how I met them. And I start with, it was, the night of December 1st, a storm was about to come into Miami. I had booked my hotel room on a credit card. I was $25,000 in a debt. I had just quit my recent freelance job. I had no other outcomes. And the only way I was leaving Miami was with a contract that I would get this TV show greenlit. That's how I start that story. And you're like, okay, how does that work out? You got me. So then you kind of can rewind, since the pandemic, I got laid off and I said, I'm going to have 3 weeks of, while I'm hunting for jobs, I'm going to write a script. So, I wrote a script, but then, I pitched it to Hollywood producers and whatnot for 6 months. And they said, PJ, your script is great, but it's too ambitious. It's too much money, to make this live action. You're a first time filmmaker. But then, I pivoted and blah, blah, blah. So you always want to use the word, but then, like I did this, I experienced the challenge, but then I found out, and here's my but then after Hollywood filmmakers told me I can't do it. But then I heard about, Web3, NFTs, crypto, and, how much liquidity there is in the market, how much opportunity there is to tell stories about the future. And so I said, I need to go to this crypto conference. But then I found out, it costs this much to go, and then, so I solved that. But then so using, but then as frameworks of, I hit an obstacle, I figured out how to push through it, but then something else went awry. That's how we tell stories in Hollywood. That's how we tell great stories in person too, right?
Yeah. And that's how we can tell a great story in a business.
Right.
And so it does take some creativity. It takes a release. Sometimes you as a leader, you have to get away from all the noise. You have to get away from the minutia. Maybe it's a trip. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's some meditation or downtime. But you have to get back into discovery, right? So this process of discovery, influence, achievement, right? So discovery is that essential revisiting. And so you can rediscover new paths, new ways to share the story, to involve your audience and, of course, your customer, your hero.
Right.
For example, with our leadership elite group, right? I'm not the hero, I'm the guide.
Yeah.
Right? Even though I'm the coach, right? And you're my client, I'm your guide so that you can be the hero of your story.
Yeah.
And so the entire framework is built around that. And it forces me because it's work. It forces me to think, how can I create experiences for you that you will then embody and grow and feel fulfilled in this, I mean, it's an economic choice, right? I mean, this exchange. And so you think, well, like we were talking about earlier, some might say, okay, that's fine, but that can be so exciting, being a part of a coaching program or a mastermind program. But we've already made the examples of industries that are
car wrapping versus accounting. Anything can have a great story. And I'll tell this as a filmmaker. All businesses is ways to solve problems, right? And so inherently, there's a story in every problem. There's a before of the norm, like we experienced with the hero's journey. There is an inciting event which says, look, the norm can't be continued. You must change. You must adapt. And then there's, oftentimes people they fail, but that's not a good story until they learn the lesson. And so usually the lesson can be learned through learning all this by yourself. But more often than times, a lot of time and frustration can be solved is by incorporating a guide, a mentor into someone who's experienced these problems before, can walk you through it, and then you carry on that legacy afterwards.
Yes. So I've classified, if you will, distilled what success looks like in 5 words. So it's super simple, and some of our members of our audience will have heard this before, but it's worth repeating. Solve relevant problems, which you've talked about problem solving, with excellence. You can't just solve any problem. They have to be relevant. What does it mean? What is relevance? Well, relevance can be broken down to be, you have to be able to hear it, you have to be able to understand it, and it has to cause action, right? So that's what relevant is. It's important to you. So you have to be a problem solver, because all business is problem solving. If there were no problems, we'd all be out of business, period. But you can't just solve problems that are relevant. You have to do it with excellence. You have to, and you say, well, Nate, what if it's mediocre in certain areas? Well, you'll probably die if it stays that way.
Yeah.
Because someone else, as you rightly said earlier, PJ, will be approaching it with a higher level of excellence. And profit has been said, it's the applause you get, right, for doing great work. And so the excellence piece is excellence in our messaging, excellence in our human resource model, right? Who we have on the team, excellence in our operations, excellence in our finance. You say, well, that's really difficult to do. Yeah.
Right.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
But the payoff is it's immense when you can create a model that solves relevant problems with excellence with this story that you're telling.
Yeah.
Because it pays dividends.
If we could like step away, or if I could step away from acting like I know everything or whatever, I'm the expert on storytelling. Sometimes, vulnerably, candidly, I don't always feel like I know what problems my audience has in the entertainment industry. And here's why. All day I listen to entrepreneur podcasts and on basically how to create blue ocean opportunities. For example, I was telling you about this product, this amazing new company called Cana, which here's the big problem. We go to someone's house and their fridges are filled with all these separate drinks that took all of this, carbon to create the bottles around it, agricultural land to create, whether it's wine, whether it's coffee, whether it's tea, sports drink. There's a huge cost, and then transporting all those kind of things. But really all anyone wants is when they go to a place, they just want choice. They just want to be able to choose lots of different drinks. It's why we kind of love restaurants and eating out, because they have a lot of choices. But our homes, we don't have that. So what Cana does is, because 99% of all really drinks we consume are water, it's just 1% that's chemicals, whether it's sugar or caffeine. So they've created sort of a Keurig-like machine that can do, alcohol, sugar, caffeine, salt, and then flavor chemicals. And they can do Coke that tastes just as good as Coke. They can do tea that tastes really close to tea, coffee, really close to coffee, cocktails, really close to all these cocktails. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of options, push of one button, and they send you new cartridges every month. So that is like, when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be a new $1 billion company. And I think to myself, and then I go to the entertainment industry, like it's so much harder to create new products out of the blue for the entertainment industry, right? Because every show's been done before, in a sense, every genre has been done before. And then we're also in the gaming business, so every game's been done before. So it's actually kind of hard to get in the mind of our consumers of like, what are their great pain points in media? Dude, they have all the shows. We're oversaturated with their options. So how do we create a new product that's a new value proposition for them, that's so compellingly original, fresh, and unique, that now they have to watch it to the exception of all else? It's not as clear with entertainment. Help me. Coach me. I struggle.
Well, and that's, I think, part of the journey is because sometimes you don't have an answer today. Mm-hmm. Because the contexts have not yet converged. We've talked about this. Mm-hmm. But what you do is you lay out the desired end result. You lay it out and say, this is where we want to be. Mm-hmm. We want to have the differentiation strategy to where it is fresh and new and exciting, and start to assemble the pieces that begin to lead to that. And some pieces are not ready because they haven't been invented yet.
Yes, and a big part of my job is just finding out new technology, right? Because I'm always trying to figure out how do we disrupt, normal models, which is why we're in the Web3 sort of crypto space, in the sense of like, I'm trying to figure out what are ways in which, so here's a big pain point that we're kind of testing out is you have shows like Star Wars and you're early. Let's just say you're early. Let's say it wasn't such a big phenomenon, but you found out about it early and you bought a movie ticket to that theater, and you, instead of getting a movie ticket, you were just given like a playing card of like Luke Skywalker, and there were only like one of 10,000 of these printed. In a sense, like I think the future of entertainment will be that the earlier you get in on these projects, and if you're able to take some manner of ownership in those projects, you're actually able to benefit in the outcome, and it makes you an evangelist for those indie projects. In the music industry, you can find an artist early, invest in their sort of project early, and then you reap the rewards because you told your friends about it, and sort of the cumulative brand rises. Exactly.
And so this process then requires patience.
Right.
It requires observation. It requires foresight, awareness. And sometimes it's that some technologies or some resources have not yet been invented. Sometimes they've not been discovered.
And it's
uncovered.
It's true, but it's also the convergence of like all of those different principles at once, right? So I not only have to figure out new models of entertainment for consuming and products and all those standard things, but then I have to wrap it around a new story, a new mythology, right? And, our story roughly is, in the future, a bunch of teenagers are able to kind of have Matrix-like gaming technology where it's not virtual reality, it's beyond that. It's neural reality. It's going into the game. But of course, it goes from, just a tournament of a bunch of kids to kind of more the Jurassic Park, Hunger Games style thing where everything starts to go wrong. They get trapped in the game, and then now it's a fight for their lives. We like the story. I don't think the story itself is anything new. I think there's been similar things, and we're doing lots of new spins on it. So the question is, how does this show be something new, a new vision? And really for us, and what I talk now we have a Marvel writer on our team. So that's a huge amount of pressure. I feel like, okay, shit, he's following my vision. And, he's done some incredible, writing before. But I told him and my writing partner, really we're wanting to tell stories about connection and disconnection in an increasingly digital world, right? Because all our audience feels disconnected. They have, more information than ever. They feel more lonely. More opportunities for friend requests than ever, but they feel more lonely. And that's only going to intensify over the next decades to come. And we're telling a story about digital connectedness in the future. And so our game is our show explores PTSD when games feel like reality, 100% like reality. You can't literally you can't tell the difference between it. How will our experiences in those games with the trauma can come to reality, but also too, how are we making friendships? How are we sort of experiencing that connection in the future? And so I think it's hard to take story differentiation, product differentiation, technology differentiation, and converge it into a cohesive narrative of this is new, no one's doing it, we're valued. You know what I mean? There's so much that's going on.
There's so much, and sometimes it's knowing that's where you need to go. Mm-hmm. And I'm a huge proponent of it's not luck, it's context conversion. With who knows what circumstances will change in the next 12 to 24 to 36 months, however long that takes. For example, I think of Milton Hershey, who many people don't know who Milton Hershey is. He's the famous
Hershey chocolate.
Hershey guy, right? He's the king of chocolates back then. And in the late 1800s, he was actually the king of caramels, or caramels, as some call it. And he... at the 1893 Chicago Exposition, he goes to the exposition and he is walking around the machinery hall and sees this machinery that's making milk chocolate. And it was the Swiss had kind of a lockdown on that, but it was actually German machinery. And he tasted it. He's like, this is going to be a game changer. Mm-hmm. And he said, caramel's a fad, but chocolate is something we're always going to have.
It's good.
He at the end of the show, he buys the equipment. They're not going to ship it back to Germany. He just buys all of it. So 1894. Problem is, he doesn't know how to use it. And he hires some guys to help and put it all together, but he can't reproduce it. And he starts working on how to do it. So a year goes by, 2 years go by, 3 years go by, 4 years go by. He starts making chocolate products, but nothing like the milk chocolate. The problem is that it can't really be sold in the United States because the shelf life, by the time it across the ocean, it's rancid. So he knows, if I could be the first one to make a 5-cent chocolate bar in the United States, not only because of the possibilities from a capitalistic perspective, but because he knew how he felt when he tasted that chocolate. He thought, this is just delicious, and only the wealthy could eat it because of how difficult it was to procure. And so he wanted to be able to have the common person to enjoy and partake in that.
Right.
But the time was not yet ripe because he had not had the technology to catch up with the equipment that he had in terms of the technology, the trade secrets. He couldn't. There's even stories where, and this may be lost to myth, that he secretly became an employee in some of these Swiss chocolate companies to get their trade secrets. Whether that's true or not, it's quite possible. So by 1900, he sells his caramel company.
Yeah,
he goes all in with chocolate.
Wow.
And then he says, not only am I going to go all in with chocolate, I'm going to create a chocolate city. And so his wife, his attorney, are like, you're nuts. You need to have your head examined. You don't even have a recipe. You're making some money, but he goes all in. And by 1901, he had a chocolate bar, but by 1903, it was what you would taste today, the Hershey bar.
Wow.
And so it was a 10-year journey to be able to, for all those contexts to converge, to be that differentiator, to satisfy that need, to make that hero of the story, that customer, the common person.
Is the one who brings the chocolate back to the family. And it's like, oh, Jimmy brought us chocolate.
Yeah.
Or Charlie brought us chocolate.
Charlie brought his chocolate from the factory, right?
Right.
And everybody tries it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
And there's many more stories around that maybe we'll tell in different episodes. But the point is that as you're creating this story, you may not have everything you need today. You may not have the tech to make the film industry, turn it upside down in a way that is going to happen. But you have the vision for it.
It's good.
And you're preparing.
That's good.
You're preparing and preparing and preparing. And as each one of those context pieces converges, you're one step closer to making that vision real.
Man, that's so helpful to hear, because I'm always so frustrated at like the lack of technological ability that we have right now. And you hear it all the time in great directors too. Like James Cameron wanted to make Avatar in 2000, but the tech wasn't there yet. George Lucas wanted to make episode 1, 2, and 3 after Star Wars, but he didn't have the tech for all the digitalization. And really, we don't have to stick on this too long, but I know the next trend that's coming in, it's AI based filmmaking and video games, because I've been to these conferences and I'm seeing the early stages of the products. And basically what you're able to do is these computers are able to simulate kind of anything. It's like, okay, there's programs called Midjourney right now where you can type in, Jar Jar Binks at the Nuremberg trials. It's my favorite prompt. And it comes up. I'm serious. Like, it comes up. It'll take images of Jar Jar Binks and it'll put him in handcuffs just Google it and it'll come up. I'm telling you. And it'll come up, him in handcuffs in, Geneva or whatever the hell. And so,
I didn't have to finish typing.
Dude, it's so funny. It's so funny. So that is the future of creativity, artists, filmmakers, video game designers, all those things, is AI assisted models, where instead of you actually having to need the knowledge to do all these things, it uses huge data sets, amazing innovations, OpenAI, GPT-3, like all these awesome new AI models now. And it now democratizes storytelling, because a kid like your son who wants to create a new video game or a new model for a video game can just type in or say to it, hey, I want a desert like Tatooine, but I want floating cars, and then I want the people, instead of normal people, I want them to look like Pikachus, or you know what I mean? Like, you can create all these new merging of ideas, and because it's pulling from billions of images online, it'll populate it like that. And then you're able to say, okay, for shot number 1, you put on your virtual reality goggles and you said, okay, shot number 1, I'm going to be here with the camera. And then I want, Pikachu number 1 to run through the scene. And I want him chased by 2, dragons from Lord of the Rings going in that way. And it'll just generate that. And that, honestly, if I could do anything 20 years from now, that is what I want to help create, is empower a new generation of storytellers. But I don't have the tech to do that right now.
Right.
I don't have the budget to do that right now. And so I have to do what's in my hand.
Yeah. And prepare for that.
Exactly.
And know and believe and not give up. Because the human condition is a story. And we are participating. And that's, humanity is wrapped up in a grand story and small stories along this journey. And so as businesses, as individuals, for us to create a story that will lead people to a better future is a magnificent, beautiful thing that we can't underestimate the value of. I'm so glad that we've had this conversation, because I believe the answer is yes. You can create an epic story in your business just as epic as some of the most attractive and resonant movies that stand the test of time.
Mm-hmm. And some of the most cult classic companies, like beloved companies, whether it's Tesla, Apple, all those things. And so the question is, what transformation have you gone on that you can offer to your customers?
Beautiful. Thanks, PJ. Good having you.
Good to be here, man. Thanks so much.
Well, my friend, thank you for joining me on this episode of A Call to Leadership. If you've been listening, you've probably heard me talk about our accounting and advisory business. And this show was actually born out of that business, those relationships. I found that entrepreneurs and professionals were missing aspects of their leadership that fed into their bottom line and helped their businesses be successful. If you're in that place where you feel, oh my goodness, my tax person or my accountant, I can't find them, or maybe the service wasn't up to my expectations, do not despair. I'll leave how you can find us in the show notes.